I'm Maddie Lee, Thunder beat writer for the Oklahoman, and today I'm joined by columnist Barry Tramel and fellow beat writer Erik Horne, and we're talking trade deadline, guys. A lot has happened today. Honestly, a lot has happened in the past week, but let's get it out of the way first. Something that did not happen: Anthony Davis did not move. Barry, what does this lack of movement say for the teams involved, the Lakers, Boston, the other teams who are involved and interested in AD?
Well, I think what it says is that the Pelicans knew that their position of strength in getting the best deal they could, it's only going to get better as we get near June. There was no pressing matter to make the Pelicans do a deal now. The only thing they really so they accomplished two things. They kept Boston in the bidding, and they put the screws to the Lakers. Any morsel of information that came in terms of the Lakers wanting to give New Orleans this, and this. New Orleans shouted it out to the world, try to submarine the Lakers season, retribution for what they think is tampering, trying to get a superstar like Anthony Davis. So some of this was vindictive, but it was also just solid strategy. Boston can't trade for Anthony Davis because of the collective bargaining agreement. They can do it after the season. So in June, we'll see this whole thing start up again, and Boston, may be able to trump that Laker offer.
Erik, if you're the Pelicans and you have AD on your roster, and you've gone through all of this, you know that you're getting rid of him soon. What do you do with him at this point?
I'd send him home because every game that he plays, and Anthony Davis says he intends on playing the rest of the season with the Pelicans, every game he plays, he's putting himself in as an injury risk. Now, granted, I think teams are still going to want to trade for Anthony Davis whether he's injured or not, but that's still going to be a weird locker room dynamic. That's going to be a weird player-coach dynamic. That's going to be a situation where a guy is playing games that are utterly meaningless. And frankly, you don't want Anthony Davis out there if you're the New Orleans Pelicans because he's going to help you win games. So you want that guy sitting at home helping you get a better lottery pick. And then, look, with the situation with the Knicks and how bad the Knicks are, a team that Anthony Davis is reportedly interested in going to as well. The Knicks, the Lakers, the Celtics, all interested in Anthony Davis. The Pelicans, as Barry said, have every incentive to wait until the offseason for Anthony Davis to trade him because they're going to know where all the draft picks fall. They're going to know if the Knicks have the #1 pick in Zion Williamson. They're going to know, where some of those Boston picks are going to land because Boston has 8,000 first-round picks. So it's a situation where you need Anthony Davis to sit his butt at home. It doesn't seem right to keep a guy from playing ball. But look, Anthony Davis and his representation said, look, we're going to demand a trade in the middle of the season. So the Pelicans have every right to say, all right, you're not playing for us.
Yeah, all bets are pretty much off after you pull that move. All right, done with things that didn't happen. Let's move on to all the craziness of today. You have teams like Washington that look nothing like they did a couple days ago. For you, Erik, who are the biggest winners on this trade deadline day?
Milwaukee Bucks, big time win for them. They were already the best team in the league record-wise, and in terms of point differential per 100 possessions, best team in the East, even better than the Warriors in terms of record and point differential. They've got the possible MVP of the league in Giannis. They shoot the ball like crazy from three. Mike Budenholzer's doing a great job. He's probably going to be the coach of the year. And then they add a guy like Nikola Mirotic from the floundering Pelicans, and they don't even have to give up a first rounder to get him. That's a big time move for them. That's a guy that can come off the bench and play a power forward for them. That's a guy who can start at power forward alongside Giannis if they want to put Brook Lopez on the bench and start Giannis at center. I mean, they've got some really versatile lineups. They got some lineups that can really space the floor around Giannis, who isn't a great three-point shooter, but is a guy who can get to the rim as much as he wants because he has so much space to work with. That's a dangerous team going into the playoffs with as much offensive firepower as they have. Not to mention they're already one of the best defensive teams in the league too. So the Bucks are a clear winner at the trade deadline.
Who do you like, Barry?
Well, in addition to Milwaukee, you got to like what Philadelphia did. I mean, adding Tobias Harris to that starting lineup, they've got a Golden State Warrior type starting lineup with four close or actual all-stars. Plus J.J. Redick. You're talking about Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, J.J. Redick. That's a heck of a starting lineup, the best this side of Oakland. So now Philly hurt its depth, made some trades today. Markelle Fultz goes down to Orlando. Jonathan Simmons goes back to the Sixers. Maybe Simmons can fortify them a little bit. So depth is going to be an issue with Philadelphia come the playoffs. But that's a heck of a starting lineup, one that trumps anything in the East.
Obviously, when it comes to trades, ideally, both teams get something out of each of it, and we'll have to wait and see how some of these picks pan out, frankly. But right now, the way that things are looking, Barry, who do you think really didn't do themselves any favors for this trade deadline?
Well, I mean, most teams got what they wanted. You know, teams like the Wizards just tearing down. Teams like the Clippers and the Mavericks saying, hey, we don't want to make the playoffs. You know, take some of our good players. We don't want to make the playoffs. That's, you know, it's backward thinking in my mind, but that's their plan and that's what they want to do, and they successfully achieved their plan. They, you know, even a team like Memphis, which sent Marc Gasol to a foreign country. You know, to me, it's a sad day in Memphis, but they got a pretty good haul back with, you know, with what they got from the Raptors. So very few teams come away from this trade deadline thinking, nah, this didn't go good at all. If you're a fan, it's different though, because you look at the Clippers. They're in 8th place in the West. They're in the playoffs with most people would say the best chance by far to get to stay in the playoff race, and the Clippers wave the white flag. They don't want to make the playoffs. If Dallas hadn't torn down its roster, Dallas could make a playoff run the way everybody's falling apart. So, you know, I think Sacramento did well as well. So teams got what they want. Nobody is forced to trade, but over the long haul, somebody like Washington, to me, it was not. When you're trading Otto Porter and you're trading Markieff Morris and you're trading guys that made you competitive, and you're looking at a total rebuild with a $42 million a year point guard who doesn't get to play for another year, I don't know how you can come out a winner. I'd say the biggest loser is the Washington Wizards.
Would you agree with that, Eric?
I'd actually say the biggest losers are the losers are LA Lakers. You know, not only do they have to endure the rest of the season where they might not make the playoffs, and you're going to have guys disgruntled. You know, we saw them coming off of what was like a 39 or 40-point loss against Indiana, where, you know, LeBron was sitting at the end of the bench, and there were 3 seats in between him and the next closest guy. That's a team that's a team full of guys who are just not really in the mode of you know, playing hard right now. When you get blown out by almost 40 points on the road, those are a bunch of guys who LeBron basically wanted out of town. Every guy on the team was involved in trade discussions except LeBron James. So that's a team that's probably not going to have a lot of motivation to play very well. Those guys needed to go. And whether you agree with what LeBron and his group did or not, it was probably best that a trade happened. Now the Lakers are kind of playing out this season. They're just playing out the string now because they don't have Anthony Davis. They can't make another trade. They're going to go get buyout guys. They're talking about bringing in Carmelo Anthony. That's not going to save their season. So I think the Lakers are the big losers from that standpoint. And then they're also the big losers in that once this thing gets to the summer, Boston becomes a player in the trade discussions. New York becomes a player in the trade discussions for Anthony Davis too, because of the pick that they're going to have that's supposed to be pretty high. They have a good chance of getting that #1 pick, which would land them Zion Williamson. Even the Clippers will become a discussion in those, become a player in those trade discussions, you know, with the picks that they've accumulated and some of the players that they have. So, you know, the Lakers to me are the big loser of this trade deadline. They needed to get that Anthony Davis deal done, and now, you know, there are a lot of other factors in play for people to go get Anthony Davis along with them.
That's a good point. When we're looking at trade deadline in a bubble, so often we look at the actual trades, but there's so much going on because we're talking about people here. We're not just talking about straight up transactions. Transaction-wise, though, we saw a lot happening in the East. How much better do you guys think the East is, if at all?
I mean, you know, teams like Philly, like Barry was talking about, Philly got a lot better with Tobias Harris. That's a serious, you know, all-star caliber starting power forward. You know, Marc Gasol. You know, you question the Raptors giving up a little bit of their depth in order to get Marc Gasol, but at the same time, you know, they add a frontline starter, a guy who's a really good defensive center, just a great passer. And frankly, you're not going to play that many guys in the playoffs anyway. So once those rotations shorten, the Raptors were still able to keep, you know, the core rotation guys that they like. Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Fred VanVleet, their backup point guard. So those are two teams that got really strong. Boston might regret not making a move here, but they've already got a team that's really strong itself. And Gordon Hayward's got some upside. Maybe he can get back into a rhythm and become the player, or closer to the player that he was before he had that ankle injury last season. He hasn't looked very good all season at all. So, the East is stacked. The top 4 teams in the East, it's going to be rugged. And then we already talked about Milwaukee too. So, the top 4 teams in the East, you'd probably rank ahead of the top 4 teams in the West right now. Only thing is the best team in the West is Golden State, and they're probably going to win the title.
Next, there's still going to be movement. Even though we're past the trade deadline, we're moving into the buyout market. Barry, for you, obviously, have more buyouts as we approach March. But for you right now, which guys on the market are the most desirable for teams out there?
Well, I think one of the guys, of course, fairly prominent, Wesley Matthews, and the Rockets certainly be interested in Wesley Matthews. The Thunder would be interested in Wesley Matthews. The Warriors probably be interested in Wesley Matthews. But he seems like perhaps the best fit could be in Indiana, where the Pacers have lost Victor Oladipo, and Wesley Matthews is like a reasonable facsimile, older, a little slower, not quite as good, but very reasonable facsimile to Victor Oladipo. And for a team that was right there with all these powers in the East that we were talking about, Indiana was in number 3 seed when Oladipo goes down. If they could find fill that void just a little, Indiana would stay ahead of the pack in the East, finish no worse than 5th, and give somebody, one of those 4 Eastern heavyweights, a really good first-round playoff series. So if Wesley Matthews goes to Indiana, he could elevate, I think, the Pacers more than he could elevate the Thunder, the Rockets, or the Warriors.
No, there's some intriguing guys all over the league. Some guys who haven't even been bought out yet, but there's some talks around them. I think Wayne Ellington's a guy who's going to get bought out in Phoenix. He was traded from the Heat to Phoenix this week. He's a shooter, a guy that can add some spacing on the perimeter for any team. Some of the teams that Barry mentioned, Houston, Golden State, the Thunder, even Philly will still be in the market for him because Philly's depth is sapped coming off of their bench.
And Wayne Ellington, I think he's a Philly guy.
Wayne Ellington is a Philly guy, so that would be a perfect fit for him. Another guy that hasn't been released yet, but look, the Clippers don't have any use for a lot of these guys on their roster. They're not trying to win games. They're trying to get into the free agency market. 2 guys who came from the Memphis Grizzlies, JaMychal Green, power forward. He can stretch it. He can shoot 39.4%. That's what he's been shooting this year from 3. He'd be a good addition off the bench at the stretch 4 position. Garrett Temple, longtime veteran, 9-year guy. He's played a couple different places, but he can be a 3-and-D wing that can come off the bench and help a lot of teams. And look, our old friend from Oklahoma, he played here for a few years, Enes Kanter. He's going to be on the market. He's a guy who the Knicks recently bought out. He's a guy who can come off the bench, more of a traditional center, power forward player, and he can get you an easy 10-and-10 on any night. And look, he has his defensive liabilities, but he's a guy, if you give him the right minutes and balance him against some second units, he can go get 10 rebounds and get some easy buckets. He's one of the best post players in the league, and certainly there's going to be a market for him if there's a market for a guy like Carmelo Anthony who hasn't played all season, basically. So, there's some good players out there, and, they all have their deficiencies, but, teams are going to be looking for those little upgrades here and there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens before March 1st.
Yeah, still a lot to keep track of between now and then. Thank you guys so much for joining me. From Gatehouse Media and the Oklahoman, I'm Maddie Lee.